again, this is Earl with Custom Handrails. The last time we were here together, if you remember, I invited you into our empty chair back here, and I'd like to invite you again to come sit down, take your coat off, get comfortable, and we're going to cover the topic that we ended with last time of actually cutting the miter in the newel cap after you've gotten the proper profile on the side that's going to match your rail. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, here we are in Rhinoceros, my drawing program of choice. And if you remember the last time we were together, I went over the process that I use to get the proper profile on the outside of this cap so that when you miter it, it's going to match your handrail perfectly. So I promised you that the next video would be a way in which I've come up with to accurately cut the miter in the cap. So I hope you're comfortable here in my office in your chair. And while you're sitting there looking at this, I want to ask you a question. How would you cut this mitered in this cap? I asked myself the same question when I had to cut the first one, and I'm sure you might have scratched your head too. How can we get this done as accurately as possible? First choice was a bandsaw. Okay, how are we going to lay this out? We have no square side, we got a contoured surface. How are we going to get a pencil line even on here? How are we going to figure out how to lay it out? We have no reference points here to go by. So this is just not going to be an easy layout situation even to get something to reference our bandsaw cuts on. So then I went to the miter box and put that in there and looked at it and then scratched my head and said, this isn't going to work too well. We got a round surface on here. It's rolling around. The cut is going to possibly hit this point and maybe with the round blade not get the bottom part, or go real deep in the middle to hit both ends or overcut the one. It just wasn't working out too good. So I came up with another method, and that's what we're going to go over today. So I hope you're comfortable, and let's get on with the show here. Alright, here we have a nice mitered newel cap set up here. Has a large 8-inch diameter cap, a nice easing coming into it. This is the one we're going to use for our example here. So what we want to be doing here is figuring out a way to jig this cap up so that we can get a nice cut and remove this section here that we don't want here, so to match our rail. So let's go over here to our plan view here of this setup. We have an 8-inch diameter cap drawn here, and we have our rail coming into it. So what we want to do is stop right now before we go any further, and this is a checkpoint number 1 here. It's nice to draw something, but in reality it doesn't always come out exactly the way we drew it. So what we want to do right now is check our cap and make sure it is indeed exactly the 8 inches that we hoped that it was going to be. The same with the width of the rail. You want to check that out before we set up this cutting jig to make sure that when everything's done that we find out that, oh well, the cap wasn't exactly 8 inches. So there you go, a checkpoint for you. Okay, now we're going to take our plan view and we're going to transfer that onto a piece of MDF. So we're going to take and lay out your actual rail cap diameter. If you stick with your 8-inch, you're good here. If you didn't quite match that in the actual, then you have to adjust this. Then you're going to want to offset your diameter in half the width of the rail, and you want to lay out for a 3/4 inch hole in the center of this thing. We're going to drill this out later and put a 3/4 inch dowel in and use that for a reference when we put our cap in, and hopefully you have a 3/4 inch hole in the bottom of your rail cap, which you'll need to put on top of your newel post anyway. So that's what we want to do. Next, we want to get our rail lines, the width of your rail, extend it up into your newel cap, and the center line should line up with the center of your cap. Okay, now we want to take and draw your line. We went over this in the first video, where your rail width intersects the radius of your rail cap. You want to draw a line from that point to your offset line and your center line of rail on both sides. And then what the next step would be to draw a line which is tangent to the circle and square to your miter cut line, and that would be this line right here. So that would be the next thing that you want to draw in on this piece of MDF, and you want to mirror the operation onto your other side and get that set up. Okay, the next step would be taking it to the saw and cutting your this triangular piece out, and this is what we want to end up with here when we're all done with that. There's a nice triangular miter cutting jig here, and then we're off to the table saw. Hey, here we go. This is a table saw you can really sink your teeth into. The only good thing about it is you don't have to worry about cutting your fingers. Alright, let's throw a spoil board onto our miter guide. So let's do that. We're going to increase the size of our spoil board here so that we have room and to support our cutting jig. So let's go ahead and slap our cutting jig up on there. And the first thing we're going to do is try and get our saw blade. We're going to raise that up, and we're going to set the saw blade to be cutting at the height of the exact intersection point on our jig here. So that's what we want to do. And after we've done that, you want to cut through the jig and your spoil board, and you want to take it and flip it over then and cut the other side out. Alright, that's starting to look like the way we want it. Alright, now the next thing we're going to do is take that triangular piece that we just cut out, and we're going to take our rail that we've already cut the miters on in the miter box according to our drawing. Now we're going to take that and scoot it right into our jig at the widest point at the top of the board, so that you can determine and see, first of all, is our miter right, because this is what is going to be cut on the cap. And if your miter on your rail is a little bit off, now's the time to fix it. And you want to make sure that your the widest point on your rail is intersecting with the diameter line here of your cap. Otherwise, you're not going to line up too well. So that's checkpoint number 2 before you go any further with it. This is a great way to make sure there's no surprises when you cut that cap out, that it's not going to fit this miter on the rail. And then if you had to make adjustments to the rail, you know what's going to happen. This thing is going to start getting wider or narrower, and you're not going to line up where you want to be on the outside here. All right, now let's take our cap, and we want to take and put your 3/4 inch dowel in that hole that you put in the bottom there of your jig, and put it on your cap. Put the cap on top of your dowel so that you can spin that around and orient the grain the way that you want it. I prefer the grain running back and forth this way, mostly because if you have to do any kind of alterations to this, the edge of this miter cut, the grain is going in your favor if you do it that way. So once you've screwed this thing onto this this miter gauge, miter gauge, miter jig, we're going to attach it with a clamp to our miter gauge on the saw. So let's set that up here right now, get the right things turned on, and now this is where it gets a little bit tricky to see where we need to line this thing up so that we're cutting right on the line. Before we had a nice line to go by on our gauge. Now it's all covered up and you can't see. But if you cut your spoil board all the way through, now you can view the little window in the back and get your cut on your jig to line up with your spoil board exactly right. And then you do the same procedure. You cut it with this side of the triangle down, and then you flip it over onto this side, line up your window here, and make your cut, and you're good to go here. I got the wrong one there. So that's how I've come to cut these caps, and it seems to work pretty good. I want to show you a photograph of one that this drawing is taken from right now. Okay, let's have a little fun here. Let's see how close we can get this CAD rendition here of this cap to line up with our actual here. There we go. There's an actual shot of this this rail cap in action here. Let's try another one. There we go. This is the actual handrail from that drawing. Pretty nice miter there. Let's just do one more here, see how good we are. There it is. Alright, good enough. So that's how I have come up with a good way of putting this miter in here. It works for me. Hopefully it works for you if you need to do it. And as far as needing to do it, anybody that's in the stair business and railing business that has been around for a while, eventually you're going to get somebody that's going to want a restoration job on an existing older staircase that has some type of rail cap like this. That's what this job was. This was a restoration job. The miter cap and the newel post had been damaged at one point. They replaced it with something that didn't even match the handrail profile and just sort of blended it in here. So keep that in mind. Alright, I've got to run. Stop your snoring, will you? Come on. It wasn't that bad. I think next time we're going to take a walk out into the shop, show you some of the equipment I use in the building that I work in, and also show you some caps that I made recently that look like they're mitered, but they really aren't. So until next time, happy handrailing and stay safe. Thank you for watching.